Hey everybody, it's Carm here. I'm coming to you on a Saturday evening. Just missed it. Fuzzy was right here in the same position Rocky was a couple of videos ago. As soon as I reached for the record button, he bolted. So sometime, maybe soon. But just wanted to come on and share some more things I've been revisiting. Doing a lot of listening the last few days to just all kinds of things, all different genres, and really kind of a random approach with just grabbing whatever's next, and just not even worrying about what I'm in the mood for, just listening and allowing whatever turn takes to take, I guess. But I have four here that I found all have kind of a unifying theme, in that they're all solo albums. Just one musician on the album playing all the parts themselves. Whether it's multiple instruments or just one or two. I know I think Gary's done a couple of videos on those, about saying how that's a favorite of both of ours, and I'm sure some of you, just kind of like that multi-instrumental approach to, or just one person playing everything on an album, whether it's overdubbed or just kind of straight live. There's just something about that approach I've always found intriguing. So yeah, I'll start right in with, I think this is the earliest one out of the three of these. Herbert Juice, Philosophy of the Flugelhorn. It's on Japo, recorded 73, came out in 74. Well, he not only plays everything on the album and produces it, he also does the cover art, which I'm presuming is a self-portrait. I don't know, you see all the different layers to it. There's a lot going on here. It's very neat. It's one of those things you could free associate on for a while. But on here, as you'd expect, the flugelhorn's at the center of it, playing on each piece. But he's really a multi-instrumentalist, which I hadn't known previously. I have another album of his, I think he's playing trumpet and flugelhorn with an orchestra, a large string section and everything. But on here he also plays upright bass recorder, bamboo flutes, mellophones, trumpets, vibes, and oftentimes overdubbing them. And also on the title cut, there's another early example of using nature sounds. Sound of birds out in the field. It sounds like very kind of wild sounding. It's really neat, that whole blend. Which I don't know how many. I think too many were doing that back in the early 70s. That sort of thing was just starting. But throughout the album, the way he blends all the instruments, oftentimes he'll start out almost like classical chamber music. Very structured and very just moving at kind of a languid pace, and then gradually picks up momentum, as well as improvising, particularly with the flugelhorn, naturally soloing over the top. Sometimes there'll be many of them going at once, or just one, adding increasing dissonance, or just general activity sonically, and each piece kind of takes that similar approach. But fascinating. It almost reminds me of Stefan Mikas, who actually was also on the same label. If he had done something more of an improvisational jazz thing, with those kind of instruments, you might have something like that. But it actually came a little bit before Mikas's albums, so it may have led to that in some ways. And actually, for me, one of the neatest pieces is the final one, An Evening with the Vampire, which has 9 basses being played arco, or with the bow, and with the flugelhorn soloing over the top. And they're playing in this it almost reminds me superficially of serial music, the way they would use strings in in this case maybe not as dissonant, but it's this very sharp, kind of piercing, but very much like the title, quite dark and haunting. Just yeah, just a very different approach to the way I normally hear these instruments being played, and again, not really blended often in this way. But yeah, really fascinating. I think he's still living and still playing and composing. But if you're curious about him, I'd start here. It's it's experimental, but it's accessible enough to to get into, I think, for whatever your musical persuasion. And yeah, I'd recommend it very much. Yeah, Philosophy of the Flugelhorn by Herbert Juice or Use. Yeah, very good. This next one, I think I've shown this before, or I may have played it in the background of a video. It might have been for Halloween at some point, and this could really this would fit in nicely with Halloween. Woz. His given name is Paul Woz Nicky, and this is from 1981, recorded in Delaware. He was considered, part of, if there was a scene, but at least something of a collective of, I think, the musicians that were playing in and around the Philadelphia area, the late 70s, early 80s, the electronic space musicians who were oftentimes inspired by what's known as the Berlin School, like the Nightcrawlers and Ghost Riders, and later Chuck Van Zyl. And I had learned of him from, I think it was Star's End. They were doing something for their anniversary, and had an interview with several people, and they were mentioning him, and I knew I had to keep that in mind. It just sounded very intriguing. I think his music takes a bit of a departure from what you could call, if you want to call it, like post-Berlin School. It's darker. It's like a dark whimsy to it, and the way in which he uses synthesizers and also electric piano in here. You could hear a little bit. You could hear more in the way of improvisation, not necessarily jazz improvisation, but something a little freer. Not necessarily kind of resting on established patterns like sequencers. There's some of that too, but it sounds like he's throwing things in deliberately to break it up a little bit, and again being kind of playful and whimsical. And I guess a lot of this stuff too started around the time of, I'm far from an authority, but like punk music, it almost sounds like it's an electronic answer to what they were doing as far as maybe some of the aesthetic and attitudes. Just yeah, throughout there's just this kind of dark, playful. It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's definitely not. You wouldn't find this in the New Age bin, I don't think, if you're looking for a certain kind of synthesizer music. But yet it could still be accessible. There's enough balance there between, again, kind of like the previous one, the accessible and something more experimental and kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. But yeah, pretty heavy, dark stuff. But again, playful. Even the way he's using drum machine on here is different than you would have normally heard in a lot of 80s electronic music, which could get a little tedious, and sometimes you could just do without it. But it's used really nicely here, and yeah, something that was spinning a lot more. That I've had it for quite a while, but just didn't give it enough attention before. But, yeah, Paul Woz Nicky. Yeah, recorded in 1981. Definitely sounds ahead of its time too. It sounds like it anticipated a lot of what came, 15 or 20 years later. But, yeah, excellent stuff. This next one here is, I know many of you know this. In fact, I learned it from at least 3 or 4 people had shown this over the years, and I finally I got to get this. Franco Falsini, Cold Nose. I think this came out in '75 originally. It's a 2012 reissue. If you're not familiar with this, I'd say it doesn't necessarily sound like Ashra with Manuel Gatching, like New Age of Earth era, or Edgar Froese, what he was doing with Tangerine Dream around that time, or solo with electric guitar and synthesizer. It doesn't necessarily sound like that, but if you like those, you'd like this. And I think, again, it even goes in maybe more of a raw territory. Quite psychedelic, the electric guitar. And the synthesizers, especially his use of string synthesizer, are just blissful. And there's something about the contrast between the kind of hard, dark, dirty electric guitar and very blissful synthesizers. If you're into analog synthesizers, I have a hard time with that word, of that time, you would definitely appreciate this. Yeah, it goes through a lot of different textures and moods. The whole time, I just imagine going down a river of some kind. You're going in this beautiful wooded area, through canyons, and then you're going into some kind of a dark, foreboding cave, and then you're coming out the other end and you're finding yourself in another blissful place. But the whole time you feel safe while you're there, because it just, I don't know, there's something very comforting about the whole sound, the whole soundscape. I've listened to this 4 or 5 times in the last few days, and I still can't find the words to do it justice. This is going very high up on one of my all-time favorites, I'd say, as far as this genre, especially in a mixture of guitar and synthesizers. It's very distinctive. But again, as far as comparison points, if you like Ashra and Edgar and Tangerine Dream at that time, you could definitely get into this. He's part of another group called Sensations Fix at that time, who I want to look further into. I'd hearing about them for quite a while. But, Franco Falsini, Cold Nose. Not sure if he did anything solo-wise after this, but if this is the only thing, I mean, I'd say I go so far as to say it's a masterpiece. It's really beautiful. So yeah, Cold Nose from 1975. And, yeah, I'm sure a lot of you know this, but if you don't, definitely worth looking into. And finally here, this is one that I definitely learned from Chris, brother Chris JC68. And it's hard to tell too at this point, because anytime we get together, he's always handing stuff off to me, turning me on to new things one way or the other. But I'm pretty sure he showed this in a video. Ancient Ships by Patrick Godfrey. It's from Canada, I believe. It recorded in 1979 in Toronto. And again with the artwork here, which was done by Miro Melish. Now this is really a fascinating blend of instrumentation. There's a lot of solo piano on here. Superficially, I'd say it's, you could say it's kind of close to what they were doing in Windham Hill or Narada, but I'd say much closer to jazz and maybe even touches of what Keith Jarrett was doing, at that time. But I'd say, still quite distinctive. Also playing harpsichord in a way that I had never heard before. Harmonium, marimba, and bells and voice. And most of these pieces on the first side are for solo instruments. There's solo piano, then there's a bell piece, then another piano piece. Four Gale is for solo harpsichord, which again it's not Baroque, but it's also not like you'd hear in a 60s TV show or movie of the time. It's really done almost in a way that he's playing the piano, but you could tell there's a real knowledge of the history of the instrument. Again, very improvisational. I don't know, during that piece, For Gale, the solo harpsichord, I don't know, I just imagine a conversation between a couple people where one of them is hinting that they have a big secret to tell, but they keep pulling back before they're about to, and they kind of keep changing the subject and going kind of long-winded on another subject. That's kind of how the piece sounds. The opening theme is kind of like that secret being pulled back, and then the flow and structure of the piece sounds like, you know, they've changed the subject. And then at the very end, there's this real repetitious part to the point of tedium, which sounds like now they've revealed the secret, but it's become such a letdown because it wasn't that big of a deal anyway. I don't know, that's just what I kept thinking of as I was, you know, listening to the piece a few times. Yeah, it just sounded like that. Something about the structure and the flow. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but that's what I could hear in it. And on the second side, the Stone, I believe that started with piano, but the centerpiece of the album, you know, the title cut, Ancient Ships, is where he pretty much pulls out all the stops, bringing in all the instruments at different times, just adding to the layers further and further. And the harmonium playing on here is incredibly beautiful, very simple and kind of wistful and yearning. But then, you know, as he adds further instruments, it kind of, you know, the mood and texture shifts, and you know, the journey kind of widens, and then ends up with harpsichord. You know, kind of similar to the previous piece. But yeah, this is be very hard to categorize. I'm not even sure what you'd have to ask Chris where he found this or what it would have been filed under. Not that it matters really, but I mean, you wonder where this would go. Maybe jazz might be the closest thing, but you know, there's like little parallels with ECM too. You could have seen them doing something like this around that time, but it's definitely singular, and yeah, I haven't heard too many other things like it. So yeah, Patrick Godfrey, Ancient Ships. Yeah, another one solo album worth checking out if you like, you know, various instruments being kind of blended in this way, and taking you on a nice journey. So yeah, I think that'll do it. Just wanted to share a few more of these. I've got so many things I want to share that I've been going through, so I'm just trying to figure out how to go about it. So try to get a little more organized. Trying to keep the videos up with the listening, but not too, you know, too all over the place. So yeah, those are just a few examples. Maybe I'll do more, you know, maybe kind of a series of those. You'll finding more solo albums of that type, because I know I've got a lot around. Probably even more on CD. But yeah, get to them little by little, as well as everything else. Here's the background music, once again inspired by good pal Gary, who just did a video yesterday on his Gary H's Hip Road channel. He has the whole series of these Omnis, which is a compilation of, you know, kind of new age stuff from the 80s and 90s. But, I know I have more than this, but I think it came in 7 volumes, and this is the 7th volume. See the various artists on here. I'm sure well known to some of you. I think Constance Demby's on here. Suzanne Ciani, Zazen, Kevin Brahini, Mark Twain. These are several artists too who had done, you know, quite a few albums in their own right, solo. You know, just them in the studio. So yeah, if you see these around, would definitely recommend it. Well, do it for about now. We'll see what comes next. So hope we're all doing well. Gradually catching up on your videos since I've been back, and little by little. Thank you all for watching, and I keep forgetting to say thank you for subscribing too. Always appreciated whatever interest you have in this, what I'm doing here. So try to keep it coming. Well, till the next one. Peace, love, and joy.